keep your cameras off, help with that after the post processing of this recording, um, and and make our lives easier going forward. Q&A will take place at the end of the presentation tonight. So please, as any questions pop into your mind, please do put them in the chat. I'll be keeping an eye on that, and then we'll get those questions to Tanya at the end of the presentation. And yeah, to get us started, I'd like to introduce you all to our presenter tonight, Tanya Luz. We're really excited to hear from Tanya. She's the author of a fascinating book, Living with Wildlife, and a really, really passionate and fantastic science communicator. So I'll hand over to you, Tanya.
Oh, great. Thanks, Chris. Thanks for that wonderful introduction. Thank you all for joining us on this pretty chilly evening. So what I'm going to do now is share my screen, and just bear with me. All right. Can everyone see a cockatoo? Yeah, great. Okay. All right. So although Chris did a bit of an introduction and an acknowledgement of country, I would also like to acknowledge um, and extend my appreciation for the Dja Dja Wurrung people. They're the traditional owners of the land upon which the book was written. And yeah, I really want to acknowledge and pay respects to the lasting and continuous connection with land, waterways, and of course wildlife, which is the topic of this talk this evening. So just to give a bit of an overview, so what I'll be talking about tonight is I'll give a little bit of a rundown on Living with Wildlife and the book and how it came about and some of the thinking behind it. And then after that, we'll jump into some really practical examples so that you guys can go away with some tips and tricks to apply in your everyday life after the presentation. So everyone would have heard of Sir David Attenborough as a broadcaster, but did you also know he is a really, really excellent writer? So he weaves together biology, ecology, evolution in this way that's quite compassionate and is this beautiful narrative. So he uses narrative in his writing to connect us with the natural world around us. And you can see that's actually me with my binoculars there. And so, like so many people who are interested in nature, I got involved and completely enamored with wildlife and nature when I was a kid. I was actually living in London at the time when Life on Earth came out on our screens, and then I started reading his books as well. And so his approach to writing about wildlife really made an impression upon me. The other person that's been really instrumental for me as a writer and a wildlife advocate is Gerald Durrell. So many people would have heard of Gerald Durrell because he wrote the book My Family and Other Animals. He also wrote this really fantastic practical guide for the amateur naturalist. So I've always regarded myself as a field naturalist, someone who likes to be outside in nature, observing the plants and animals around me. And this book was really quite groundbreaking because not only did it give someone like me before the time of the internet the tools to study nature myself, Gerald Durrell goes through all of these different habitats, and he's got like like lakes, forests, seashores, but he also included the backyard and our house as habitats. And so in the way the book was presented, there was no difference between wild nature and the nature that we see around us in our homes and in our backyards. And so that really made an impression on me and has sat with me all the way up until now in my 50s. So just to bring you to the book, so this is what Dr. Anne Jones said about it: an Australia-wide and bright-eyed guide to the best housemates ever, wildlife. And so that really points to one, there's sort of two audiences for the book. It's the people who love nature, love wildlife, and really value sharing their lives with wildlife, but they're maybe a bit concerned that they're doing the right thing by the animal when there's an encounter. But there's also another audience, which is people who are actually kind of annoyed or having a problem or wanting to seek solutions to the conflict. So it was an interesting interplay of having to balance between these two audiences. Um, the cover here, which I love, is a green tree frog, and that was taken by Ethan Mann, and he's a really great urban wildlife photographer. And so I'm very grateful for his contribution for the photos. There's many of them throughout the book. So how great is this photo? So Patrick Tompkins, the photographer, was another contributor. He very kindly lent his photos for the book. But here we see Latrice, the southern cassowary, and you can see there's mum with the phone and then dad behind the glass doors, just making sure he's keeping things nice and cautious. So you can see that the book is divided into three parts: house, backyard, and helping wildlife in trouble. And so I think I'll talk, yeah, so where did it come from? So basically, I've got a pretty long background in biodiversity conservation with a really big focus on land care and restoration with my work, various organisations such as Connecting Country and most recently Macedon Ranges Shire Council. And in the last few years, I've also been invited to speak to groups like Hepburn Gardens for Wildlife. And yeah, the Gardens for Wildlife movement is fantastic because it is for everyone. It's not just for people who have a large area that they're hoping to restore. But one thing that really fascinated me about the information available for Gardens for Wildlife is the fact that most of it is about what to plant, which is great because you obviously want to plant and create the right structure and habitat for animals. But then the section on actual what to do or how to care for the wildlife that you then attract to your wildlife haven is usually just a few pages or a few dot points, such as control pets, avoid using snail bait and the like. So I was really inspired to go, well, hang on, maybe we need a resource that is focused more on the wildlife rather than the planting. So I think all of our listeners would be well aware that our wildlife, both rare and common, is suffering from a lot of really intense compounding threats. I really love science, and this was a book for CSIRO Publishing, so I was keen to read all the scientific literature to determine what kind of factors are most contributing to wildlife needing to come into care. And we've got car strike, we've got entanglement, that's both by netting and fences, attack by pets, and disease were the most common reasons for animals coming into care. And these four things were also really increased and exacerbated by increasing bushfire floods. And I do say natural disasters there, but it really is a symptom of climate breakdown. So that's the issue that we're facing. But however, this presents an opportunity because those four things, they're actually all human-centered. So that means that there's human-centered solutions. The other thing is that recent advances in urban ecology have shown that we actually, as people living in cities and peri-urban and rural areas, we're actually interfacing a lot with a lot of different threatened species, including endangered species such as the grey-headed flying fox with her pup pictured here. So I kind of thought, well, you know the term low hanging fruit. So let's see what we can actually do to help nature with our everyday choices. So this slide here, I had the good fortune for interviewing a lot of experts and people such as wildlife hospital operators, such as the CEO of Bonorong Wildlife Hospital, and he said that they train, I think they've trained like 10,000 people in wildlife rescuer, but he was like, what do we need to do to educate people to be wildlife preventers, which is the idea of actually making choices around the home and backyard that actually mean that wildlife is not going into the wildlife rescue ecosystem. Because anyone here who is involved in wildlife rescue would know that unfortunately, by the time an animal needs rescuing, it's actually often too late. And those papers, those that I referred to before, which are like multi-year studies in different states of wildlife hospital admissions and wildlife calls as well. Yeah, they the data is that 50% usually have to be euthanized or succumb to their injuries. So to prevent it from getting to that point is something that I'm really interested in, and I think there's a great opportunity. So let's think about what it's like to be wildlife. So I've picked Kyneton because that's like the home base of the BioLinks Alliance, and we can see here we've got patches of forest, we've got roads, we've got farmland, and obviously being really zoomed out, we can't see things like grasslands and the like. And if we think about how animals see the landscape, they make no distinction whether something's natural or unnatural. If there's resources and habitat that the wildlife can use, then they will use that. And so if we move to another slide, if we think about home ranges of animals, for example, an eastern brown snake commonly has a home range of about 5 hectares. And so what that means is in that purple square, some of the people living in a house there that have an eastern brown snake in their garden, the snake is just passing through. Similarly, an echidna on average has a home range of about 50 hectares, which is quite big. So that means that if there's an echidna in your garden, it likely knows where it is and where it's going and is moving through. And so there's this sense that our garden's actually part of a bigger, broader picture of these animals' home ranges. Then there's species that are found over hundreds and hundreds of hectares, such as gang cockatoos, or even the entire East Coast, which is grey-headed flying foxes. It's all one continuous population all the way from Cairns right through to Adelaide. And so in that sense, these animals are like visitors to our garden, and it's up to us to work out how we can be kind of a good temporary host. In contrast, these blotched blue tongues that were photographed by my husband on our back doorstep, they could live their entire lives just in one backyard. And so what that means is that you're actually the land manager of this this species' entire home range. And so that gives us a great responsibility for making sure that those lizards are safe really, and thriving. Um, I love this photo because I think this is courtship, even though it looks a bit uncomfortable. I think the male there is gripping the female. So a little bit of hanky-panky going on there. Um, so I looked further into the relationship between humans and wildlife. And traditionally, the study is called human-wildlife conflict. But in recent years, there's been this shift to talking about coexistence. I just absolutely love this term. It's a dynamic but sustainable state in which humans and wildlife adapt to living in a shared landscape. And this speaks to me so much about how animals view our human created habitats as fair game, just as much as the so-called wild habitats. This photo here really exemplifies that because it's a koala marching across a backyard lawn in Victoria with agapanthus and a spotted gum in the background. And very likely that koala knows exactly where it's going and has just come down to move from one tree to the other. So I thought I'd just share a little bit of context of how I learnt and applied some of the thinking in the book by showing this is where we live. As you can see, it was built before bushfire management overlays. We've got an aviary here. We've got 3 different kinds of possums. We've got antechinus, brush-tailed phascogales, echidnas, koalas, and the like. So I live in the Wombat Forest near Dalesford, a place called Porcupine Ridge. And again, just to zoom out again, you can see, so I'm about kind of near the patch of pine just below Porcupine Ridge. And you can see that there's this patchwork of forest and farmland and also towns. So let's get on to some practical tips. I bet everyone's experienced birds attacking their reflections in the window or the car mirror. And most people immediately think, oh, it's playing or dancing. And unfortunately, the truth is a little bit more distressing for the bird because they see their reflection and immediately think that it's a rival. So birds have an amazing, like most wild animals, they have an amazing way of communicating with other members of their species to basically warn them off so that conflict doesn't happen. They might have raised eyebrows or a little bit of a call, and then the other bird will back away. But when there's a mirror or a window, the bird doesn't back away, and so the bird escalates its behavior and attacks even more. And that can go on, as you would be aware, nearly all day. And it actually distracts the bird from its very important everyday series of things that they have to do, which is like find food, look after their young, and defend their territory from real intruders. And so the only way to actually stop this is by removing the reflection entirely. So you can see here, I've got some trees outside, and there was a grey shrike thrush who was attacking her reflection. It was quite unusual because it was a female, and all I did was find some light coloured shade cloth in the back in the shed and just pop that up. Problem solved immediately. It's fantastic. So that's a really simple and effective solution. Another solution I like to call a clay wash, but it's actually you go to, went down to the dam and got some clay and put it in a bucket of water and just smeared that over, and that completely stopped a striated thornbill who was hopping along the ledge there to attack its reflection. It is difficult when birds are, they go from window to window to window. So there's other things that you can do, like remove perches and the like. But I find that this sort of solutions works really well. Um, so when a bird is attacking its reflection, it doesn't actually die. But there's another thing that happens with windows that does and can cause serious injury. So this fantastic looking specimen here actually crashed through our window very early one morning. And I looked down and there was the brown goshawk on the couch in between my two dogs who were just absolutely gobsmacked of what's going on. So the goshawk had actually probably mistaken the reflection of the vegetation in the window to mean that she could fly through when she was chasing another bird for prey. And she actually, because it was an old window, actually broke straight through. And so I put her in a towel and put her in this box to kind of recover, because the thinking at the time was that you put a bird in a box for a few hours, and if it seems okay, you can let it go. And it was interesting researching this book and interviewing vet nurses and wildlife hospital operators and wildlife carers. I discovered that unfortunately, just because a bird can fly away doesn't mean that it's okay. And so I really emphasized in the book that you really need to take any bird that's collided with a window to a local shelter, or even just straight to a vet. Here we can see that the bird has concussion. Often their eyes look a little bit different when they've got concussion. But another thing that can happen is they can break or damage some of the delicate bones in their chest area. So they can still fly, but they're quite injured. This is a fantastic success story. This is one of the Collins Street peregrine falcons that actually collided with one of those clear fences that was on a balcony in Collins Street. And this bird was rehabilitated and released successfully by Bullock Wildlife Shelter. So with thanks to Nalini Scarf for this photo. So how do we stop bird strike? It's a little bit different to the idea of removing the entire reflection, because all we need to do is make sure that the window is visible to birds. And so I suggested one of the easiest solutions is actually to get some wet soap and draw it on the outside of the window. And when I was talking about this online, Janine Duffy shared this fantastic photo, which is because they're on a crest, they had crimson rosellas flying at speed and then colliding with the window. And this reduced the window collision by just about 100%. So that was really cheap and effective. The studies that have been done on this, particularly in the United States, because it's such a huge problem there, particularly with migratory birds, is that any pattern has to be no more than 10 centimeters apart. So it doesn't matter whether it's striped or squiggles or anything, or dots. Dots are often used. As long as they're no more than 10 centimeters apart, it makes the window visible to birds. And so Janine, being an artistic person, has taken things a step further and created these beautiful sort of like decals. This is striated pardalote with lerps, and she did one for cuckoos and hairy caterpillars as well. So, pardon me, it's a really great project at a school, because you can encourage the kids to do art on the windows and stop bird strike at the same time. So I thought I would talk about venomous snakes. Living with snakes in the garden, I think, is really important. I was really surprised to read in the scientific literature when they did reviews of snake catchers and also the survivability of snakes when they've been removed from someone's garden by a snake catcher. And radio tracked snakes often, the studies have shown that they nearly always die. And this is because when a snake is removed from its territory and taken somewhere else in bushland or parkland, it is then in an unknown place. It doesn't know where where food or water or hidey holes are, and they also tend to try and make their way back home, and so they end up succumbing to car strike. So it's really important to live with venomous snakes on our properties if at all possible. So I'll talk a little bit about that. So this picture here is actually a lowlands copperhead. So in my area, and possibly from people tuning in, the copperheads are really, really dark in color. And so people assume that they're a red-bellied black snake because of those gorgeous red scales. But you can see that the color, the copperhead, is quite a good name because the coppery color shows that it's really a copperhead, which is a very, very friendly snake. A snake guy I know referred to them as the Labradors of the snake world because they just do not, they just don't, they very rarely strike. And so we've got copperhead on our property. So this is a photo of one just cruising around. And I've got a small poodle that was in the photo before when I showed the winter strike solution. And here's a pile of rocks that we've got on our property, and the blue arrow is indicating where the copperhead is. You can't see, but Valley the dog has the lead on. And so what my way of living with venomous snakes on the property is actually to have her on the lead at all times whenever we're outside for those warmer months. And that's been so successful that now me, my husband, and the dog can stand there talking, and the copperhead will be looking at us from the rocks. And yeah, it's just a really nice solution. Obviously, it's a little bit different with snakes, such as brown snakes and the like. However, there are things that you can do. So this is just an excerpt table with some of the tips. I did a workshop a while back on biodiversity and fire for Newham and District Land Care, and it was so fantastic because so many of the things that they recommend for helping plan for fire actually really, really good for planning and living with venomous snakes. Gravel paths, making sure you avoid continuous low growing ground covers, long grasses and shrubs, and gaps underneath those shrubs. The other thing that is helpful is snake friendly mowing, which means that you mow from the house out rather than in. And another tip is if you've got a garden pond or a feature, one of those features that are so recommended in Gardens for Wildlife literature, is you make sure you don't have the garden pond in the same area that you have your pets unsupervised. And also make sure that there's a bit of gravel and well-mown grass. It's all about visibility so that if you see the snake, then you can know to avoid that area until the snake moves on, or you can bring your pets inside. And I do believe that means that it's possible to live with venomous snakes. I had an interesting discussion with someone who had 4 different species of snakes, and they were coming up to the house all the time. And she was just at her wits' end because they didn't feel safe having like small kids or dogs outside. And in that case, you almost need to create a patio for the humans and the pets, and then you have all the snakes outside. Um, Another thing to think about is if you think about why the snakes are on your property, so different snakes have different habitat requirements, and copperheads mainly eat things like skinks and frogs. And I believe that red belly blacks like frogs, but brown snakes, they're very much into rodents. And so if you've got quite a big rodent problem, then you likely have snakes as well. And so I guess I just wanted to talk a little bit about with 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 the rodents. There's many things that you can do that reduce that habitat. And interestingly, it's the same as for snakes. Avoid the continuous vegetation, but also making sure that you're cleaning up any fallen fruit, or if you've got an aviary or chickens, that there isn't any food available for them. You can see here this black rat is actually feeding on fallen seed from some sort of a feeding station. So a lot of us quite rightly don't like having black rats in our home, but we're really part of that campaign where we're trying to avoid using wildlife killing poisons and rodenticides. So that's the SGARs, they are absolutely just too strong. And we're really hoping, my day job is at BirdLife Australia, and the campaign's really ramping up, that they should be banned. And so I've just got a little bit up here from the BirdLife Australia app for birds on which products to leave on the shelf and what to try. So it's the first generation, or any products with with Camutra or warfarin, and also snap traps. The other thing that's important is sometimes you might live in an area that actually has antechinus or bush rats, and so identifying your rodent is a really important part of the step as well. I thought I'd talk a little bit also about protecting chooks from quolls and other predators. I have had some questions from people in Connecting Country about how to make sure that you don't have phascogales attacking your chickens, because no one wants that. We love our chickens, and it's really distressing both for chicken owners and the chickens themselves. And there are occasions where quolls and brush-tailed phascogales do prey on them. And like so many of the solutions in the book, it's actually all about creating effective barriers between what you're trying to protect and the wildlife who are hungry on the outside. So I've got a little graphic here. It's really about having an aviary for your birds, or a chook run, that if you can keep rats out, then that means you can also keep out brush-tailed phascogales and quolls. And if you live in areas with lace monitors or pythons, and so having a really, really solid structure that's repaired and doesn't have any of that underground access is really, really important. So I wanted to talk a little bit about feeding wildlife. So there is a few researchers and scientists around that believe that it's fine. We can actually feed as long as we do it correctly. However, there's quite a few problems with that. This photo is of a southern cassowary being fed by a tourist next to a sign that says $4,000 fine for feeding wildlife. And that's because when cassowaries are fed, they actually become quite aggressive, and their way of begging for food is actually to run up to the person and attack it. So not advisable. And this photo really exemplifies that as well. There's the being like our dogs and cats, they're tame, but animals that are overcoming their natural fear of humans to take food from us, they're not actually tame, so they can actually switch into aggression quite quickly. So that's one of the problems from feeding wildlife. Another problem that happens is that you get this. So these are sulfur-crested cockatoos, and they are here having fun chewing on a facade of Liquorland. But when they did studies of cockatoo damage to houses and play equipment and the like, they found out invariably, in nearly all cases, someone was artificially feeding the cockatoos nearby. And that brings us to another problem, which is disease. So some people might go, oh, it's really old, but that's likely to be a young cockatoo that's suffering from citizen beak and feather disease, which is an incurable disease. And unfortunately, it's spread very easily by infected birds. And so you can see here an infected bird just sitting in the bowl, and there'd be, yeah, all sorts of um, virus in that shed into those seeds. So I do say avoid feeding altogether, but if you absolutely must do it, or if you've got family members or neighbors that are addicted to it, a little sprinkle on the lawn is much better than using any receptacle. So instead of feeding wildlife, enjoy your bird baths. So I've got bird in quotes here because the bird baths are actually utilized by so many different species, echidnas, wallabies. I'm sure many people tuning in here have many bird baths. And the advantage of bird baths as well is that it's actually a life-saving thing during heat waves and droughts and bushfires. And so one of the things that is really quite amazing about a backyard is that we can actually provide a bit of a refuge during those extreme weather um, um, events. And yeah, the birds like gang cockatoos are very vulnerable to heat stress. Um, and it's funny because it's the same for storms, rain, and floods. That the advice is generally the same. It's basically make sure your garden area is a safe haven rather than another place of danger during extreme weather. So you keep your pets under control. You make sure your fences are wildlife friendly. You have wildlife friendly netting, and also you monitoring and being ready to call wildlife rescue as well. Um, the last part of the book is it's called When Wildlife Needs Our Help. And so I covered a bunch of these different aspects, and I just wanted to quickly touch on entanglement. It's a beautiful and sad photo by Doug Gimsey with this is not wildlife friendly netting. And grey-headed flying foxes suffer terribly. Other animals that get entangled in netting like this, all manner of birds and parrots, but also strange ones such as white-faced herons and snakes as well. And so it's a simple solution for that is basically make sure you choose the right type of netting. If you can put your finger through it, then that means it's not going to be safe for any of your wildlife visitors. Years and years ago, in 2010, I worked at the City of Ballarat, and I was very happy to work on a brochure there for it was a guide to living with koalas. And you can see here we went through all of the different types of fencing that allow safe passages for koalas to get in and out of people's properties safely. And I think, yeah, it's a really valuable thing that you can do on your property, no matter how big or small, is to make sure that you've got wildlife friendly fencing. Um, so I'm going to stop it there because I wanted to make sure that we had plenty of time for questions because the book covers so many different topics in house and garden and also wildlife in trouble. I wanted to see what people had to say if they had any questions. So thank you. And these are my contact details here. I can also, I post regularly on Instagram about all of these kinds of aspects. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Tanya. Great presentation. So yeah, reminded everyone, if as you do think of questions, please whack them in the chat. Well, we'll give everyone a minute to do so. I guess just one off the top of my head. I guess we all know the issues that that cats can cause, but I guess just wondering if you can touch on a couple of, you've mentioned dogs along with cats in your slides, and just wondering if you can touch on that a little bit.
Yeah, sure. I did have dogs as well, but I wanted to make sure we had time. But yeah, so the dog and cat chapter was really interesting to research because there's been so much focus on cats, and quite rightly, um, talking about the effect that cats have on our local wildlife. And one of the main findings with cats is that it's very important to work with cat owners rather than alienating them. And so a lot of the studies and research that's been done where they've actually attached cameras to people's cats so that they could get a sense of how many animals their cats were actually catching. And also they were finding out that people who thought that their cats were asleep at night were actually waiting till their owners were asleep and then just ducking out for the night. And the people were really surprised by that. So 100% containment is obviously the best way to go with cats. But having said that, there are cases where even partial containment may save a species. For example, the critically endangered western ringtail over in Albany in WA. It keeps getting attacked by cats. It's critically endangered. There's no cat ban there. And so I would say it would be useful to even do just a nighttime ban, and that would make a difference. With dogs, as a dog owner myself, and really trying to keep the dog from, attacking blue tongue lizards and all of that, it's like dogs that are above 10 kilograms are more likely to attack koalas and other wildlife. And so they're very much the ones that people need to make sure they're either contained or under control. I think the expectations that people have of cat owners should be equally applied to dogs because they have such an enormous effect on wildlife. Um, it's not so much about the killing, it's also about the chasing and the constant stress. And so where I live, every property has 2 to 4 dogs. And so the wallaby has to, what local wallabies with their young have to negotiate finding food within their own patch when there's so many dog owners. And so, yeah, that's probably what I would recommend for that.
Thank you. Question from Colin asking if you got any hints for deterring swamp wallabies from eating garden plants, fruit, and ornamentals.
Uh, we have hardly anything growing in our garden because of swamp wallabies. So, um, again, it's the barrier. Unfortunately, anything that you value, you pretty much have to put in a cage. Unfortunately, in abundant kind of areas, you can use the Jackie French method, which is plant everything so abundantly that there's enough food for the wildlife, yourself, your neighbors, everyone, But in central Victoria, that's pretty hard because the conditions aren't so lush as in New South Wales and the like. And so one thing that we've noticed is that plants like dodonias aren't being browsed by the wallabies. So we're planting a lot more of those. So you kind of have to kind of look at what they're eating and then plant accordingly, or create little fenced gardens of special plants that unfortunately look pretty through a cage.
Thanks for that. Liz is wondering if it's okay to have a water bowl for birds to drink and bathe in.
Is it okay? Yes, it's recommended, I would say. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's one of the best and easiest things you can do to help your wildlife. One of the things to remember, though, is to keep it topped up and also with fresh water. Yeah, because they come to rely on that once you've provided water.
Great. Thanks. Um, and any tips from Annemiek? Any tips to keep the neighbours' cats out of their garden?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Um, so there's a few products that are available. It depends on what kind of gardens that you have. So if you're in a close urban environment, there's actually things that you can fit on the top of your fences that are like they roll, if you know what I mean, so that the cats actually roll off. It's like I don't know how to describe it, like if you imagine like a maybe a broomstick or something that rolls like that, and then they fall off. And so that's a deterrent. The other thing is spraying with a water bottle. But then yeah, so it's very much about, I think, that community expectation that your cat should be on your property. It shouldn't be somewhere else. I hear heartbreaking stories of people saying that they had lots of birds and then suddenly, because of neighbors' cats, suddenly they don't.
Yeah. Yeah. Another question from Liz. What can you do when the neighbours are feeding magpies? Any pointers on how to get people to stop that?
Yeah, look, I know people who feed animals, wildlife. They love it. They're really into it. They really are feeling like they're connecting with the animal. And so, depending on how, let's say, addicted to it they are, so if you feel that they won't budge, then I would move them towards offering the right kind of foods. So mealworms, or those dog commercially available dog rolls. That's like a whole food. So you're moving them away from feeding them really, really bad stuff such as mince, which is the absolute worst. Um, the other thing is like maybe talking about yeah, just the joy of bird baths as well. But it just depends on whether they're feeding them really very damaging, inappropriate foods or not as well.
Yeah, great that you mentioned bird baths as well, because Ruth added a comment suggesting whether the neighbours would be amenable to a bird bath instead of
Mm,
feeding the birds. So I think
yeah.
that's obviously one approach. Um, Helen had a bit of a general a question around advice for a shade house that they've built for small birds, and thinking of a rock garden and pond and things like that. And I guess being an area that people will be using, how to adapt that area to deal with snakes and things like that. Whether you can stop snakes accessing a certain area, or if you put something that can act as a refuge nearby, will they hang out somewhere else?
Yeah, both. Well, so one thing you can do is there's this, it's called a vermin mesh, and it's got a very small gauge, and you could put that along the lower area of that um, shade house, and then that prevents them from getting in. But one of the tips in the book is also, which some snake catchers have suggested, which I think works quite well, is if you've got a large enough property, then you have a big pile of rocks and a pond and some sheet metal down in the part of the garden that you don't use. And so it's a bit like that pile of rocks that I pointed out in my presentation. She's always, I always say she, I don't know if it's a she, but the copperhead is nearly always there, you know? So that means we know where she is and she knows where we are. So that helps as well.
Great, thanks. Just for everyone who is with us as well, keep an eye on the chat. There's some interesting little comments and anecdotes and resources as well in there, beyond just the questions. Michael was asking, couldn't councils have restrictions on pet ownership in sensitive locations? Do you know of any examples of that,
Um,
and how that
yeah,
works?
yeah. No, that's a really good question. I think sometimes when new developments are like slated, they have a policy from the beginning. And so that works really well because from scratch, there's a pet ownership policy that there's either no cats or um, dogs have to be contained. I think Kangaroo Ground near Melbourne has always been a cat-free area. Um, so yeah, it's definitely a really, really important contribution that councils can make, but it's you need the support of the councillors, and I think it's also got to be done in the right kind of way so that you can bring everyone on board for it, rather than a punitive thing. It's more about education. And even though most of the solutions in the book I talk about are actually for like the individual, I think there's also really important to remember that the onus should also be on the councils and the state government and the federal government to provide funding and support for people who want to make the right choices. Like, for example, in Canberra, there's a net pardon me, and wildlife friendly fruit tree netting swap. So you can actually take your damaging netting in, and then they give you for free appropriate wildlife friendly netting. Similarly, a lot of councils have grants and workshops for people to build catios so that they can keep their cats inside. And I think it's really important for people to write to their councillors and request those kinds of supports, because not everyone has the money to build a catio or even to build a really amazing everything proof chook shed.
Hmm. Yeah. Question from Leah. How come we don't feed birds with the disease element? So beak and feather disease, for an example, but a bird bath doesn't carry the same risks.
Yeah, no, that's really good. It's mainly because the foods that we generally offer, like bird seed, bread, mince, these are the things that cause the disease. It's the inappropriate foods and the fact that the birds aren't foraging for them, and also the fact that they're offered in a receptacle rather than being found dispersed amongst the environment. And so you get an unnatural gathering of individuals, and that really helps spread the disease. The the disease in bird baths doesn't seem to be as prevalent at all because you don't have those digestive um, elements, with and the dropped food and the like. And so um, I've not seen really any literature talking about disease spread with bird baths. However, if you do see a bird with beak and feather disease at your bird bath, they do recommend maybe taking that bird bath away and leaving, like disinfecting it, but actually not refilling it for a little while. And then hopefully wildlife rescue or the like can remove that bird from the environment and compassionately euthanize it.
Yeah. Thank you. That is, as far as I can see, all of the questions that are in the chat. Thank you to everyone who's tuned in, and again the comments and discussion in the chat are hopefully really insightful for everyone as well. Huge thank you, Tanya. Really great presentation. Again, everyone, jump on Tanya's website, check out the book, and and yeah, thank you for tuning in. This recording will be distributed shortly, so if you joined us late for any reason, and feel free to subscribe to our email out list as well to keep up to date with webinars for the rest of the year and going forward. So, massive thank you again, Tanya, and
Thanks,
everyone
Chris.
have a good night.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for tuning in.
Thanks.